test. Say a couple of lines to make sure that we are functional.
All right, I can hear you well on
Okay.
stream. My
Okay.
turn. Check, check, check.
Yeah. Is it also? Can you also hear yourself well enough?
Yep, we're
Okay.
good.
Alrighty. Alrighty. So, this is the anime podcast, 2121 Spring Gauntlet, week 8. Yeah, we've continually, narrowed the list down, and so now we're starting to get to a lot more, shall we say, quality. So it'll be interesting to see how the shows are ranking up. At this point, too, also 8 episodes is usually enough to the point where you should have some mini arcs or like kind of like smaller arcs that kind of like complete their storytelling, and so it'll be an interesting evaluation point. So with that, we are gonna have our contenders. I want to give them a quick reminder of the format change from 2 weeks ago to now, uh, to last week.
Yeah,
Essentially,
so
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
yeah. So because we're at a small amount of shows, we can actually talk about each one individually. In the past, 30 shows was a little hard to pack into one podcast episode. So we kind of breeze through the middle episodes. But now that we're down to now, I believe 15, we will talk about all of them. Some more in depth than others because there's some
Yeah,
episodes that kind of not much is happening. We were
yeah,
definitely gonna go in depth with the bottom shows because that's
yeah.
definitely the highlight of the gauntlet. So the contenders are all the shows that are not the bottom five, and then the drop list is just the bottom five, and that's the if you don't know the format, those are the shows that we will be dropping
Okay.
potentially.
Alrighty. Yep. Alrighty. And coming in at number 1, Vivi Florence Ice Song maintains his number 1 position. Manatsu gave it a score of 6.5. I gave a score of 7. The rolling average has dropped by 0.12 to 7.61. I thought this episode was like, I was like, I think it's more world establishing. I will say, I am a little bit confused, like how they're spending this much time doing some world establishing when the timeline is literally like, shall I, for lack of a better way to say it, like just skipping all over the place. It's like it's almost okay. Like I kind of get like you want to do some established universe like context and stuff like that, but I also feel like if you're gonna constantly zoom in, like let's say like, oh, like 100 years forward and like 40 years back, or like that type of stuff, like you don't need to like go like that crazily hard into like, shall I say, like context establishment. Like obviously like like certain contexts of such as like, oh, like what AIs are and like kind of their role, like that's like that's nice things to knock out at the beginning. It is like slightly confusing to me. I think that a lot of the runtime is just like used to kind of like,
Wait,
shall I
what
say, like
what what
establish.
parts are you referring to specifically?
Like I think it's a combination of the last episode and this episode where they do like so much of like like I'm trying to think like the way to describe it. Like okay, like we see Diva like as opposed to Vivi, right? So we see like Diva, right? And kind of like
Yeah.
who she is, but they spend like a lot of time talking about like kind of like, or a lot, okay, maybe even if it's not talking, like a lot of like screen time kind of like establishing like, oh, like here's what like a song AI does, and like this is like how they feel in like their current universe. And like I understand that there's a certain utility to like kind of like establishing like, oh, like here's Vivi, and like I mean here's Diva, and like that's who she is. But at the same time too, like I think like with this episode, like obviously at the end we have this strange situation where the AI gets where the AI gets hacked by her helper, right? And like that's like this interesting thing, and like obviously that's kind of cool. But like almost all the way up until that point, like I don't think it's bad screen time because like I still enjoyed it, like it's like kind of cool and stuff like that. But I will say that like it's like, unless they actually stay in quote unquote this time period for like a really long time, like it is also, like I said, like I usually, okay, when you do storytelling, like you can almost never go wrong in my opinion with like kind of like, I guess, like setting build up and like establishment, as long as you're kind of moving the story needle forward a decent amount. And I think the story needle still being moved like enough to the point where like it's not like a bad thing. But especially I think for this show too, like where now it's like I feel like we as a we as a viewer are like so conditioned to know that it's like, oh, like we're going to be skipping around the timelines a lot, right? Like even there are like transition shots where like they show you like literally like butterfly effects, like like pathway,
Mm-hmm.
like event
Yeah.
pathway type of stuff.
The
Like they
timeline.
constantly remind you that like, oh, like you're going to be like hopping kind of like back and forth and that type of stuff. And so to me, it's like kind of like I think like the amount of time that they focus on essentially kind of like who this girl is as like a singer, and like it's like there's some of it it's like actually her like in emotions, but I felt like a lot of the focus is also just like on like what a singer is in that universe, which I felt like once again it's like it kind of was already established like beforehand. That being said, like it's not like a huge ding to it. Like there's still a reason I still gave it like a 7, and I feel like you still gave it like a 6.5, right? It's still like a decent score because I do think that overall, like, is it the needle of the events is still moving forward enough to the point where it isn't boring. But it's just kind of like something curious to note now that I think we're 8 episodes in. Like I've kind of like seen like, okay, yeah, like for example, like the first 4, it's like it's very critical that you kind of establish this world with AIs and how they coexist. But it's interesting to me, I think.
Uh, it's interesting you bring that point
Okay.
up because I think it's not really a choice per se to
Okay.
focus on the singing aspect, but more so uh a consequence of what happened in episode 6, right?
Okay.
When the scientist committed suicide, and
Mm-hmm.
that went well. I mean, it shows in this episode that Diva also committed suicide.
Yeah.
She shot
Mm-hmm.
herself. I think she shot herself, but there was a hole in her
Yeah. Yeah.
skull,
This is whole in scroll.
and
Yep.
so I think it's important to note that part because to her, right, we're still following the same character.
Mm-hmm.
Diva, it just knows herself as a singer, so it makes sense as a viewer or for us the show to just focus on her being a singer. And
Oh,
I think,
okay.
wait, what are you gonna say?
I was gonna say that there was a lot of focus on like this other singer and like
Ophelia.
kind of like yeah Ophelia, and like I guess the context of like being like a singer in general instead of like specifically like divas, because divas perspective is almost a bystander for most of this episode,
Oh,
which is
really?
why
I, I thought she was still the main person in my opinion. We get to see Ophelia's like story here and
yeah.
there, right? Because we learn more about the helper.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, well, I think for the most part, it's still Diva because Diva's still trying to figure out like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, who's Vivi, and
Yeah.
some of my memories coming back. She had her action sequence where she meets up with what's his name? I forget his name. The scientist
Mm-hmm.
that she saved back then.
Okay. Yeah.
He reappears, right? And that kind of jogs your memory a little bit. So
Uh-huh.
I'd say she's still the main character. I wonder. I mean, it's definitely slower paced
Yeah.
because of that. I agree with that. And the reason why I give it a high score, one of my higher scores, and
Mm-hmm.
my scores are actually very closer to 5 this week.
Okay.
So having a 6.5 is like actually really good.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one of the reasons why I gave it a big high score, definitely that ending, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of
That's a lot of interesting like
meaning.
context.
Because
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
when Vivi did not follow her protocol for her
Yeah.
mission, she killed
Yes.
herself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The robot realized he can't fulfill his mission because he was gonna get discarded.
Yeah.
So his response wasn't to kill himself, but to actually
Yeah, essentially take over. Yeah, or
take
something
over
like that.
Ophelia.
Yeah.
So it was
Mhm.
interesting to me for that, because then it's like, okay, everyone has different responses.
Yeah.
Still, that response was important because then that make kind of leans toward the why did the AI turn on to him? Because that's the ultimate
Yeah.
question. Like, why did the
Mhm.
AI go against humans?
Yeah.
And so I think this is finally a step towards that
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah, for sure. So it's still pretty solid. Like I said, like the pace definitely slows down like a little bit, but I do have a decent amount of faith that like essentially most of the screen time will be productive setup for
Oh,
like
yeah.
future storytelling. Yeah. Alrighty. This is
Number
probably
2
yeah, go
is
ahead.
86. Still up there at number 2. I actually gave it a score of 5.
Yeah.
And you scored it 8, which is your high score for this week, for a rolling average of 6.95. So it has gone down by 0.06. Why is it your high score of this week?
Yeah, so this is actually right when I saw this, I'm like the brains are like some of the cogs are turning. I will just outright acknowledge that I think that this episode basically eliminated a lot of like of my hope for like there being like a lot of like super nuanced depth to the equation and their universe, the scenarios and stuff like that.
You said
I think
it gets rid of it.
it gets rid of it. Yes, it like
Okay.
eliminates a lot of it, right? Just like through like her white colleague, like the white hair colleague, right? Like doing that whole thing where like it's just like it's kind of a little bit over dramatic, right? Like you have like
Mm-hmm.
the Reaper's older brother actually just like like that whole like it was just like a momentary snap, blah blah. You have her going to her uncle and having that whole sanctimonious speech, her
Yeah.
deciding like to actually just like run away or whatever. Like it's like
Yes.
I think that there was potential for nuance that kind of just got like I think that like I was secretly hoping that this is gonna end up being like some Vivi level of like oh like just really makes you think type of stuff, and I think that this
Mm-hmm.
episode
Yeah.
like just toss that like out. That being
Fair.
said, I kind of like I think I've vocalized this very clearly, like just throughout this Gauntlet podcast talking about this show.
Yeah.
I really kind of expected this to just be like a very cliche ass story. And so I
Yeah.
think maybe my reaction when I saw it was like, okay, well, this is like honestly kind of what I expected. And like I'm not like that disappointed. And I do think that like if you are going to tell the story kind of, shall I say, more just blocky and just like very straightforward, I do think that it did like a pretty good job in like stirring up kind of like the stakes, and like like
Sure.
I think it sets up the pieces decently. Yeah, so I think that like it was, I will admit now, especially now like seeing like the gap in the scores, I will admit that like I think that this episode like took out, it's like it's not very crafty slash like nimble storytelling. Like I think it's like
Yeah.
very
Mm-hmm.
clunky and that type of stuff. But I do think that like if you were to, I guess this is the whole conversation about like oh like viewing a show through the lens type of thing, and then like kind of giving a rating through the lens, whether it's like is it self-aware, is this like like a shonen, is this like a crazy drama, right? Like like, and I think that maybe my score got affected a little bit by I guess me just not really expecting this show to like kind of be like a little bit more nimble in its storytelling to begin with. So yeah, what was your five? What was that driven by?
You definitely hit some of the
Okay.
parts, right, where it's like
Yeah.
they really took out the nuances
Yeah.
that they could have included.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've also watched my fair share because war is a very common
Yeah.
theme
Yeah.
in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
animes.
Mm-hmm.
Every so I've been watching maybe the
Mm-hmm.
anime now for like the past 3 4
Yeah.
years,
Mm-hmm.
and there has been a lot of animes that focus on war, and it's very
Mm-hmm.
similar to this, where it's like they have a very strong premise, but it always kind of
Devolves.
relegates to
Yeah.
this like big grand
Yeah. Set up in this.
motion,
Yeah.
majestic motion
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't make really much sense. It kind
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
is sweeping. So like
Mm-hmm.
I think this episode kind of, like you said,
Yeah, yeah, like it simplifies it, right?
catapulted in that
It blocks.
direction.
Yeah, it's like there was okay, like there were some moments in the previous shows. I would admit, almost all the good moments in this show, now that I'm thinking about it, were kind of riding off the coattails of, shall I say, like epic moments more so than anything else. So.
Hmm.
I think that kind of fed into me subconsciously about like why I still didn't like fully expect the storytelling to actually be nimble. But I definitely agree with you on that one where it's like it's so blocky that it's like it just kind of, like I said, like there's any nuance that you could have had that like maybe you were kind of expecting from some of the interactions gets like chucked out the window, and now it's just like a very like ta-da, we are friends and
Yeah,
this is gonna be like
a lot of
yeah.
the character. So one of my so five is, I think, somewhere in the closer to the lower end of
Yeah,
my of
okay,
this week's score for me personally.
okay,
I didn't like how, because at the ending of week seven's episode,
mm-hmm.
we see this big monster. Now we know
Yeah,
it's
mm-hmm. Yeah,
the
Reaper's
guy's
older brother.
brother.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah, he starts destroying a lot of these robots. We don't even get
Mm-hmm.
that scene in the beginning of this
Yeah,
episode. Kind of just glosses over that.
yeah,
It shows, hey, there's only 5 members left.
yeah,
I realized a lot of these characters are just not nuanced at all, and that kind of
yeah,
contributes
yes,
to
mm-hmm.
the simpleness of this show. Like
Yeah,
Annette, which is the main character's friend.
yeah,
Like she's very pessimistic in 86, and
yeah,
it's like
mm-hmm.
it's monotonous the entire
Yeah,
episode.
mm-hmm.
Her uncle wants to commit an ethnic cleansing,
Yeah,
essentially,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's his stance from the beginning. He hasn't
yeah,
wavered, and so it's like
mm-hmm.
kind of boring.
Yeah,
And I realized as the main character, Vlad, her name's Vlad, I think,
okay.
he doesn't really change
Nope, she doesn't.
much.
Yeah, she doesn't.
She
She's
doesn't.
just like, yeah.
This is, I think, maybe her. She it's She has actions that she does, but I feel like she never really is the one that starts it or makes
Yeah.
that decision. Like even this
Yeah.
breakout, it was Reaper that told
Yeah.
her, we'll be waiting. We
Yeah.
know what we mean. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not really compelled
Yeah.
by her or a lot. So yeah, so I had to give it a 5. Starting to lose a lot of my momentum in this show, or my faith in
Yeah.
this show for sure.
Yeah. And on the topic of trajectories for the next one, we have those Snow White notes. Still maintaining its score at number 3. Manatsu gave a score of 5.6. I gave a score of 7. The rolling average dropped by 0.07 to 6.82. And the reason I brought up trajectory is because this show's finally okay. I'm not gonna give it a lot of praise because I think it took 3 episodes to essentially kind of ramp up the emotional buy-in that it did in some of the previous episodes in like 1 or 2 episodes. Okay,
Yeah.
deadass took 3 episodes for like some of the stuff to happen, but like I think like it's almost like my praise for Burning Kabaddi, where I'm like, oh, like the end, it's like, oh, like it's almost like a little bit shonen-esque, where like you just pump up the emotions, let's fucking go, like type of
Yeah.
thing. And like I think that like this show finally at the end, like I was like, oh crap, like the last like 5-ish minutes is like everything's like it's like the pieces are coming together emotionally. It's like you have this, I think like this episode finally, right? You have the story of the girl in the glasses who's like, oh, I was like legitimately only here just because I wanted to help you, and she has this like this resentment of right being like kind of like the strong one, and yet like nobody's really noticed her. And there's like I said, like first of all, like I think like it's still very slice of lifey, but like it's like I think like in the slice of life realm of tropiness, it's like decent, like it's done decently, I think. And then like the moments like that, and then you have like the different competitors kind of like showing up their stuff, Mr. Super almost closed eyes
Yeah.
crochet guy. It's like finally gets like fired up, and like the whole group, like you have the I think like it's like first of all, I will say that like I think the music in this episode too, like noticeably for me, is like, oh, like it's actually like I think that the some of the previous episodes, the way they described it, I think that the description was almost like overly outdid what the actual music was. Okay. Like it's like the way they described it, it's like, oh, the music didn't actually sound as epic as the way they were describing it. This episode, like I think to be fair, like it's also like these are supposed to be the people that kind of like need to watch out for, right? Some of these competitors
Yeah.
and stuff. Like their music was actually, I thought the music was really good, and I think like this is just, it's like a small thing, but like at the very end, right, where like the ending OST, like they cue it in like for like I think like 30 seconds ish before the ending credits actually start rolling out, and it's like everyone's like coming together. It's like, oh, this is gonna be a big moment. It's like, oh, like this is like like it's like, oh, like it feels nice, like, and I'm hopeful now. Like I think I saw that, and it's like I said, like it took 3 episodes to do something that I felt like they could have just done in one, but it's like I see this like kind of like this stuff happening. I'm just like, oh, yo, like maybe like I have some hope that like the future trajectory is gonna hopefully look a little bit better for this one, as this one has also been sliding a decent amount.
Yeah. So I gave it a 5.6, which seems no like there's a big discrepancy in our scores, but it's actually my 6th highest
Yeah.
score this week. So
Yeah.
and it's a big jump from last week. 'Cause
Yes.
last week I gave it my lowest score.
Yeah.
I agree. I still think the bad points of this show is still there, which is like it's a little bit too slice of life for me.
Yeah.
Lots of simultaneous expressions and size.
Yeah.
There's a lot of still shots that are still being
Yeah.
used during big moments, which I dislike.
Yeah.
But we did get a character arc, a little bit of a character
Yeah.
arc with I forget her name, the sister of
Glasses.
the.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, we also get
Yes,
glasses
yes.
for
Yeah,
sure,
good
and then we also
glasses.
get the
Yeah,
sister.
the sister. Yes.
And so I thoroughly enjoyed the. So, of all the performances, so far in this show, this was one of the more pleasant,
Yeah.
like in terms of audio.
Yes.
Like when
Yeah,
they were
exactly,
explaining
right.
this stuff, I thought
Yes.
it really matched the
Yeah.
audio. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I
That's
could
the,
see it
yeah.
happening.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Like.
And so, yeah, so I gave it a higher score this time for that. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this makes sense because I didn't like when it was all expository and I couldn't really
Yeah.
understand it with the music. And you're right in that this is all setting up for next week when they perform, right? Because that's
Yes.
like the kind of a big climax for this
Yeah.
show. Because I don't see it climaxing more after that. Because I mean, there's only what 3-4 episodes left. And so this will be the climax next week, and then the denouement for this arc. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for this performance, and I really hope that the reason why they've used those shots in the past few weeks is because they spent all their production budget on
Yeah,
this
yeah,
one episode.
on this one episode. Yeah, definitely for
Yeah.
sure. So wait, just for clarity, so there's this is at 13 episodes, right? Is it 13 episodes, this show, or is this one of the 12ers?
So always assume. Oh wait, no, always assume it's 12, and then there should only be some that are 13.
Okay.
But let me check really quickly.
So just like it's kind of a little bit of armchair analysis, but so if episode 9 is gonna be them doing the group performance, that
There's 12
means
episodes.
okay, that's 12. Okay, so if episode 9 is gonna be taking up like essentially the group performance, the last 3 will maybe actually be kind of like his individual story, like getting
Oh,
to
you're
blossom.
right. He still
Yes.
joined.
Yes,
Yep.
he
Okay.
still has it.
That
Yeah,
should
yeah,
be enough.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. And so the last 3 episodes will probably be, and I'm guessing just because it's so slice of lifey, like now it's like almost like it's telegraphed because it's so slice of lifey that he ends up like essentially his own performance gets elevated by elements of like his friends, his Nakama, and that type of shit.
Sure.
Like, and like
Or
that's
he like
probably,
crashes and burns.
Okay, oh yeah, or just crashes and burns. Okay, I would have so much respect for the show if they actually did that type of shit, which would be crazy. But yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. But yeah, it seems like episode 9 is gonna be the group performance, and then the last 10, 11, and 12 are probably going to be a little bit more focused on his individual performance and mirroring that kind of like his pursuit of his grandpa's voice, and then obviously his older brother versus his mom, and like that whole conflict like going on.
Yeah.
And it's just yeah. So we'll probably see some of that. But yeah, I will say that like I said, a 3-episode arc that easily could have been done in one, in my opinion. At least it's finally coming to a close. The setup, the pieces are there now, and yeah, I'm hopeful that it's gonna look good. Yeah.
So now at number 4, we still have a taxi. I get a score of 6. You also gave it a score of 8, so it's also your high score for this week. We're rolling an average of 6.48, an increase of 0.07. Why did you give it your high score?
This was also another high score where I think I will admit this is another one where I think that this week in general for both of my high scores, I don't think that like it like knocks it out of the park in nuance. Obviously for 86 is like actually the super opposite way where I go like you just went like super blocky with the storytelling. This one didn't introduce, I would say, like too many new elements, but I still think that like let's say like them expounding on the couple of story arcs, right? Okay, so we have Mr. Like the monkey that just like annoys the shit out of both of us, right? Like we have that whole thing where they kind of explore a little bit more into his like desperation, like his mom, and like they do that with what's the ultimate porcupine boss guy's name again?
Yano, I think.
Yano, yeah. So Yano, they do like some interaction there. You get to see a little bit more nuance with the Fox manager and being like, you see that he actually gives a shit about the group, even though the group, from what we see from Yano and his polar bear bodyguard, like seems to more just be kind of like a bait front to like do other illicit activities. But you see him like like actually like elicits like some real passion for the group. You have like the whole diving into what's the main character's name again?
Otokawa.
Otokawa, yeah. Okay, you have the diving into the Otokawa, the whole thing where they had the conversation about synesthesia / like like the absolute focus and all that type of stuff. Like there isn't too much new stuff that's being introduced, but like I just found it once again like it just seems so enjoyable. Like this particular episode, like the mystery envelope didn't get really pushed almost at all, I'd say, right? It's like pretty much exactly where we were before, but like I think like once again it's just like character development being backed by what I would call very like refreshing, fast, like witty conversations, and like it was just like very enjoyable to watch. I think even just despite the mystery envelope just really not getting a lot of attention this week. Or like
I think they shouldn't introduce new things, right? Because we're at a point in the season where they already introduced their last character, right? Which is Yano. At least according to the poster.
According to the
poster. We did not see the horse at all.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, it makes sense because I don't think there's enough screen time. I agree that at this point, if you're watching this show, you need to start from the beginning because there's so many things that are going on that it's really easy to miss if you like don't have both of your eyes on the screen, right? So I agree that that's part of the enjoyment, seeing
Yeah.
all the dots connect.
Yes.
And part of the allure of the show is how they continue to
Yes.
connect in the next few weeks. And I think the
Mhm.
only really big mystery point at this point of the show is still who
Otokawa. Yeah,
if
Otokawa's yeah.
if he
Mystery
like
passenger.
who's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
kid who's the
Yeah.
kidnapped girl,
Yeah.
and is she being forced against her will, or did
Yeah.
Otokawa actually kidnap her? I
Yeah.
think
Mhm.
this show would be interesting to paint Otokawa as this a good hero for what happens in the next few weeks, and
Yeah.
then at the end you realize that he's actually like a kidnapper.
Yes. Yeah. That would be
Cause
one
yeah,
point
that'd
of
just
that.
be
Yeah.
an element of like character depth right there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So this is definitely. I think that there's a lot of themes, right? Like like the hippo teenager guy being like, oh, like we're trying to be like pursue justice and all that type of stuff.
yeah.
There are definitely elements of it where like there's this theme, like the two Pug
Comedians.
brothers. Yeah, the two Pug brothers.
Oh,
The
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and like where one's like clearly like just out for himself, and the other one's like, oh, I want to do it because of justice, right? And like so there's definitely the themes of those going around. And so if we have Otokawa constantly being painted as, shall we say, like a very seemingly anti-empathetic, yet is doing things because of like shall we say noble principles, and then have the story turn around and be like, oh, he actually did kidnap her, and like that type of like like it would be
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, like I said, like it's still just incredibly fun to watch. Yeah, I will say that I think like if we were to take the average of this week for both me and Manatsu, like it was a lot lower than last week's, I think, in general. Like, but yeah, this was one of the ones that I feel like standed out a little bit more so than the others.
Hmm.
Alrighty. All right. Kuikumo at number 5. This is your highest score. You gave it a score of 7. I gave it a score of 6. The rolling average has now been bumped up by 0.07 to get 5.98. What was the reason for your score?
Yeah, I think so this is actually the last show that I watched this week.
Okay.
And I realized a lot of what was missing this week was character development.
Yes.
And so it was refreshing to see
Ah,
a
I see.
lot of the
Okay.
internal monologue coming
Yeah.
from the main character, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Throughout the entire episode, Ichika is like in this kind of she's
Yeah.
trying to process
Yeah. Mm.
what's the guy's name? Tamura.
Yeah.
And
Tamura.
him
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
he asked her out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we hear a lot of the internal monologue of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't like him, but what should I say?
Yeah.
Why don't I like him? Because
Yeah.
he's great. Oh, there's this other character that I maybe kind of like.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that we see and we hear her like process it all internally.
Mm-hmm.
I think it adds a lot of depth into what the situation is. I
Mm-hmm.
also think that I definitely ship more Tamura and the Amakusa daughter, I mean
Mm-hmm.
sister,
Yeah.
because I think there are a lot of similarities between the two characters that I think makes sense for them.
Yeah.
So I think this is just a slice of life done well, and I really
Yeah.
enjoyed all the conversations, the interactions the characters have with each other.
Yeah, I think that it's the way I viewed this episode was like it was still very, it did what it's advertised essentially, or rather it did what the genre is trying to achieve, like quite solidly. I think that's like the best way to describe it, right? You watch some of these, shall
Mm-hmm.
I say, like more romance heavy slice of life because you want to like experience like the swooning of the ups and downs, and like kind of like the shall I say the journey of falling in love, or like how you get there, right? And I think that like that is that element right there, is definitely uh it's done very well. I think it's whether it's internal dialogue of her. I think even like little things where, for example, where Tamura, they actually have him just go balls to the wall with like a confession, right, and being like, oh yo, like like this is like he's actually like refreshingly, in my opinion, like very refreshingly being like, this is exactly, I'm just gonna lay out all my cards on the table, right, and that like that motion is able to then set up some very nice internal like reflection from the main character, right? And she's like, oh, like it's literally
Mm-hmm.
just on the table, and she gets to do like a reflection. And so yeah, like I think like once again, like this isn't like gonna go just like super crazily like off the walls like amazing, but like it is very well done for what it's trying to achieve. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. At number 6, we have To Your Eternity. This is the highest it's ever been ranked. It went up by 3
Yeah.
spots. I gave it a score of 7, which is my highest score for this week. And you also give it a score of
Yeah.
7. For a rolling average of 5.76, it went up by 0.18. And I believe this is the biggest jump this week. Let me check. Yep, it is the biggest jump by wide
Okay.
margin because the
Okay.
next highest jump is 0.07.
Okay. So it was a pretty big jump. Yeah.
Yeah. So I gave it such a high score
Mm-hmm.
because I think I mean, the whole episode was focused on Gugu, right?
Yeah.
Because we kind of experience why he's like kind of neglected from
Yeah.
society,
Mm-hmm.
purely just his face, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we see the sadness, and it's so interesting that a child like him has to mature up so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes through the process of running away because he's being used as a freaking brewer, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Not fertilizer. What's the word I'm
Uh,
looking for?
whatchamacallit?
Fermenting.
Fermenting. Yeah, fermenting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he runs away, and then he meets people that don't like him, and he takes out his face, and he just is ousted by society. Then he finally meets his brother, which was a big turning
Yeah.
point for him. And he's like, and I think he finally realizes how cruel the world is because it's like
Yeah.
his brother essentially just stole the money that they
Yeah.
both had saved and used it to squander it.
Yeah.
And so he gives him the ring, says, "I don't have a brother," and leaves. It's like, wow, the 6-year-old just needs to grow up because he has nothing else. So I really like that. Then we see the ending as well, and our main character is also growing up, right? Because he was afraid of the force, but now he's
Yeah.
like, I can't. I realize I can't mature up without you.
Mm-hmm.
So all in all, really great storytelling, I think.
Yeah. I think like it's obviously, the story still is mainly about Fushi, right? And the stone and all that type of stuff. And now from the top of the poster, right, he's encountered now 4 out of 5. I think the one on the far left is the only one that we haven't encountered yet.
Wait,
But
which one?
so on the poster, he's
Yeah.
encountered all the people besides the one on the far left at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that being said, I did enjoy how this episode basically didn't have a lot of Fushi in there and instead focused on Gugu. And the nice part about that is it's almost kind of like by design, like clever design, I suppose. Like focusing a lot on Gugu still is going to eventually get internalized into Fushi somehow, right? And so it'll still kind of, it's almost like a double dip where like you get to like do like some extra stuff with the world and have like a character, but theoretically, like as a viewer, you're also supposed to like kind of like eventually at some point, right? Like it's gonna get absorbed into Fushi. At least that's what it would like lead me to believe. And then like so there's
Yeah.
also like that kind of like it's almost like I said, like slightly double dipping into character development. And yeah, I
Yep.
mean I think like it's just
Exactly.
incredibly. It's like a very it's a very nihilistic episode. And I think that it's just like it was just really well done. Like it's just like damn, like this is just like fucking like this is just shit. Like we have this whole thing where like oh like it seems like he just given a new leaf and then you find out that the old guy's just literally like a fucking like just curious, right? Like he did that out of curiosity, not like out of some sort of like crazy love, right? Even the grandma and the shit just like, oh, I fucking miss his cooking and shit like that. Like it's just
Yeah, not him, just the cooking.
it's just like the cooking and stuff, like that type of crap. Like she like you see her actually give so much of a shit about Fushi. And like, okay, to be fair, okay, I can't like
They've gone
point
through a lot.
fingers. First of all, they've gone through a lot, and secondly, I also can't exactly like just condemn her. Obviously, it's just a cartoon, but like let's say this is real life, like meaning a being like Fushi has like implications for like life in the universe, and so I could kind of understand why she's a little bit more obsessed with making sure that he adapts humanity or whatever. And so I still kind of get it, but yeah, like it's just it's a lot. And I think that it was just like once again, like I said, like the nihilism is just like incredibly well done. And it's like ooh, like it's some feels, man. Like it just so this is very well earned. And I think that this is probably this is a show, at least Upward Motion has seen the most upward motion. We started
It's
off
one of 2 shows that has seen tremendous swings upwards.
and so very deserved. Alrighty. The next one is Shadow's House. Number 7 dropped 1 spot. Manas gave a score of 5.3. I give a score of 5. The rolling average dropped by 0.08, and it still has a pretty high score of 5.72. What did you think of this episode?
Yeah, so 5.3 is actually the lowest score I've given to this show, actually.
Okay.
Um, I think it was interesting because I was thinking a lot about what would happen in this kind of arc if the
Okay.
debut is going to be over.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, it doesn't really matter. So it's more of like them trying to journey,
Yeah.
but it's more of the same. Like it's been
Yeah,
the
it's
same journey.
incredibly the same. Yeah. I
Yeah, and so there's nothing new so far. Okay, there's something new at the end.
at the very end, right? But that's like the last 30 seconds, or like those 15 seconds,
Yeah.
right? You're like, damn, like okay, like finally like some juicy ass shit. But like outside of that, legitimately, it's just like more of like Emilico being like hella wholesome. Which okay, like I get, like it's cute seeing like a little
Yeah.
ray of sunshine. But like that's literally like been the theme of like the show for like 7 episodes out of the 8 we've seen, and like it's just like
Yeah, I
yeah.
just don't. I need her to be challenged, like actually challenged. Like I'm
Yeah.
okay with her being optimistic, like that's
Yeah.
fine. But I need her to be a bit more challenged. And so I was like, this is kind of getting boring because I just want this
Yeah.
debut, or at least this maze, to be
Yeah,
over.
too over, yeah.
Um,
And kind of
and
see
then
what
obviously
happens.
the
Yeah.
ending was really nice, where we find out that Edward is. We don't know really, but Edward's
Okay,
like
yeah, yeah.
half shadow.
Yeah, or like
Like,
maybe like actually Shadows. Okay, like there's a couple of implications. Either that he's actually like a half hybrid and he's actually
yep,
using this as kind of like a strategic, shall I say, like gotcha for everyone, or even or it could also imply that under every Shadows thing is actually just like a what we would call prototypical human, which would also have
yeah.
very interesting implications. But yeah, like so.
I mean, and the well, there's another route where
Okay.
it's at the end, people who pass their debut, the shadows take
Okay.
the
Okay. The
body.
body.
Because funny enough, like, we see a lot of the adult shadows, but we never see their
Yes.
dolls, right?
Oh.
So it could be like, oh, one of the rites of passage at the shadow takes the doll's body. Because other than the kids, we have not seen, besides them and Edward,
Yeah.
we have not seen an adult doll.
Okay. Yeah.
So those are the three avenues, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Exactly. So it'll. This is also, I'm assuming, a 12 episoder.
I believe so, but it's the manga's still going on, so
Okay.
it's just gonna wrap up whatever this big arc,
Okay.
first big
I
arc
see.
is.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think like it's at at this point, at episode 8, if I were to hand out like, shall I say, a categorization card, I'd say for mood. Okay, not talking about like what the
Yeah,
genre was designed to be, but for
sure.
mood, like it's almost like a bit of you. Okay, you would be the most satisfied if you treated, or your mood was like kind of like a comfy thing with a little bit of spice like thrown in there. It's kind of like
Sure.
at this point, like kind of like just through the pacing and
It's
that
it's
type of
also
stuff. Like yeah.
the period genre, right? Because
Yes.
it's like very
Yeah.
gothic.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's like, I do think that like mood wise, right? Like if you're kind of looking for something a little bit more relaxed with just some little spice in there, like I think that this show actually still does that decently. But yeah, I mean, I think like the comfy label that I've now slapped onto it definitely comes from the fact that yeah, like the envelope's moving pretty slowly, and like I said, like we've seen basically 8 episodes where like 7 or 8 episodes at this point. Sorry, 6 or 7 episodes at this point, where the main theme of the entire thing is Emilico is very like ray of sunshine, right? And so it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, alrighty.
All right.
At,
Number
no,
8 is Tokyo Revengers. Went down one spot, primarily I think because of To Your Eternity ramping
yes.
up. I give it a score of 5.6. You gave it a score of 5 for a rolling average of 5.61. What'd you think of this show this week?
Um, okay. I think that it wasn't okay. Like it was still somewhat enjoyable. I think that there was, um, I felt like it kind of like went around in circles like a little bit. Okay, like so
Hmm.
I'll say that like some of the previous episodes really dived into this whole idea of like, oh, like here's him in a situation, but let's now interpolate that with him being in the future and kind of the extra wisdom that comes along with it, right? And this one
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
almost feels like it's just like actually him just fucking around in his old life. Like legitimately, like like you have the moments where he goes like, "Oh, I'm about to have a big moment. Why you cock block me?" and that type of shit. You have the thing where he goes like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm like still weak," but it's like oh, like you didn't tell me what's different this time, right? He's just like, "Oh, I'm just still physically weak," and like it felt like I said, like it just kind of was like went like around like big bunch in the circles. At least at the very end, we get a little reveal that's like, oh, somehow them stop fighting still doesn't is exactly stop the events of like
Yeah, yeah.
of like Draken potentially getting killed. But like I said, like it just felt like I'm not gonna call it a filler. because there was still
Yeah.
some character development and stuff like that, but it did feel a little bit of that vibe where it's just like it like kind of went like all over the place, kind of tangled, and like there's finally like a tiny bit of clarity there, but like some of like shall I say the plot forwardness of the series, and like I said once again like the interpolation between him as like a being a middle schooler versus having like his adult brain and his adult consciousness like didn't feel like it really was present this episode.
Yeah, I agree with you on all those points. I felt
Mm-hmm.
like it felt more of a slice of life episode
Yeah.
with
Mm-hmm.
his a lot of his interactions with
Yeah.
Hina.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um and I agree that it's like he kind of became a little bit too involved
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
in this past world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he finally kind of snaps into reality once he gets beaten up, which I agree with you. Like
Yeah.
they don't like, oh, I'm only strong with them. I enjoyed that scene more so when he's talked about how he felt comfortable and felt strong
Yes.
with
Mm-hmm.
Draken. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I really agree with that.
Yeah.
Uh, but the whole like I'm weak still, I was like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, and during this entire time, like he caught his breath because he's like, okay,
Yeah.
cool, they stopped fighting. But I feel
Yeah.
like I guess the suspense of the show is you actually never know if you actually fixed it until you go
Yeah.
back to the present.
Yeah.
Until then, you just have no idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so there's like a little time gap where it's like, oh, I
Yeah.
have to go back. I have to go into the present to see if something's fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it didn't get fixed. What happened? Yada yada
Yeah.
yada. And
Mm-hmm.
all the time you spent fixing it is time that you cannot be there, right?
Yeah.
And so there's like this like
Yeah.
urgency, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So I mean,
uh,
it's still decent. Like I said,
yeah.
it's still maintaining like an overall decent score. Like the needle barely moved on this one. Just yeah, looking forward to see kind of like where this story goes. Alrighty, at number 9, Burning Kabaddi dropped one spot, most likely once again just due to the rise of To Your Eternity.
Yep.
Manasa gave a score of 5.5. I gave a score of 5. The rolling average is at 5.58. Dropped by 0.05. This is I guess almost somehow okay being on the same thing same theme as last week. This was very once again like a very shonen-y episode. You have like
Yep.
shall I say like incredibly archetypal characters showing up. Like like
Yep.
it's like like there's just so much of the episode focused on oh like Tubster is Tubby, and then like cute girl is kind of like
guy.
very girly, or, like yeah like like a guy, like it's once again like this is actually I will save this spiel for like another context or something like that, but there's actually like an entire discussion around how essentially Japanese media treats LGBTQ topics, but it's very true. But what I will drop is just to say that like this type of character is incredibly tropey in slice of lives. You will see this
Yep.
like a lot. And yeah, like I think like it's just like an amalgamation of a lot of tropiness, right? And it wasn't. I didn't give it like a super low score because I guess like at this point it's like you're just kind of bought into the idea that it's just really a shonen. I think that it just went like a little bit like a kind of a little bit balls to the walls, the tropiness like all just squeezing it into one episode where I kind of was like
Yeah.
But I mean like,
so
yeah,
so I actually gave it plus.
Okay.
I gave it a plus points that because I the first comment I put here on my notes
Yeah.
is, wow, there's 3 numbers left. Like, are they
Yeah.
gonna introduce? Because they show all the characters in the
Yeah.
opening sequence.
Mm.
Like, oh, are they gonna show all the 3 characters like
yeah.
one by one? Because that's so
Yeah.
slow, and I don't want that. And then they just all joined at the same time. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, great, good. I only have to sit through like one episode of like
Yeah,
intro
okay,
to these
yeah,
characters.
yeah.
I gave those plus points actually for doing that.
Okay, yeah. It felt like there was definitely a lot of like ham-fisted cheesiness. Like I said, like it's just like
Yeah.
this is like as prototypical as it gets. But yeah, I mean, it's a shonen. It got over that. I'm
Yeah, I
assuming,
also give it
yeah.
plus points for the comedy. I thought I laughed a lot with the narrator commentary.
Oh, okay, like where he goes like, oh, like they say something and be like, this is in fact not the case. Or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
like, type
yeah,
of shit.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, like that was decent. So yeah, I mean, I still, I think that it's at number 9, because I will say, like complexity points usually don't get earned by shonens outside of like peak moments, but like
Yeah.
it does the genre like decently, and so
Yeah,
it is where it is
exactly.
because of that. Yeah.
Alrighty. At number 10, we have Mars Red. No movement here. We both actually gave a score of 6. I think that's the first time we had
Yeah.
the same score.
Okay. Yeah.
So it went up by 0.06 for a rolling average of 5.57. This episode this week was interesting.
Yeah.
I think of all the episodes of Mars Red, this one made the most sense in my opinion.
Yeah.
It felt like watching a show that was written beforehand because like the past
Okay.
few
Yeah.
episodes, the
Mhm.
earlier episodes besides episodes 1 and 2, they felt kind of
Yeah.
a mismatch of like really random
Yeah.
things. Uh, I like the whole episode was kind of following one of the characters. I forget the character's name. We kind
Yeah,
of
but
see
like
it through,
the elite guy, the elite youngster shows,
yeah,
so
and
to
so we
speak.
see it
Yeah.
through his lens, and
Hmm.
I did I did dislike the flash
Okay.
forward because this
Okay. Yeah.
episode takes place like a year after what
Yeah.
happened last episode, which is kind
Yeah.
of weird for me.
Yeah.
Because they don't really talk about the flash forward. You have to kind of
Hmm.
infer from it.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
other than that, it was interesting when he interacts with the new vampires and the
Yeah.
kids,
Hmm.
and he does the
That
out,
stay away. Yeah.
and
Hmm.
yeah, and we know that that only can happen if hierarchy
Yeah.
wise you're above,
Yeah.
right? And he didn't understand it at first. Oh well, he did understand it. It's his partner that didn't
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to see him do it and teach the kids, I was like, we never
Yeah.
saw that interaction before. So
Yeah.
I liked that. I also though did not understand. I still don't understand why they're making everyone vampires. The
Oh,
antagonist I felt was
okay. I think the explanation for that one, and this is like with Mr. Backstabby that killed his fellow two vampires or whatever. The guy that has the vials, right? So from
yeah,
my understanding, it's because they want to essentially farm out these like quote unquote truly elites. So essentially, when the vaccine gets handed out, there will be certain specimens that actually essentially don't just
survive.
immediately get like destroyed, and so like the vaccine, the ones that are remaining, these are supposed to be like the cool ones, or they're like because like he has a dialogue where he goes like, oh, we found like some treasure trove shit, like where I think like five elites of the super vampire units, like they show up to the area, and he goes, oh, we finally found some good shit, and then like some malfunction happens, which by the way like still seemingly a little bit asspull, which is just like kind of the
Yeah,
theme
yeah,
of
yeah.
something like kind of super dramedy, but yeah, but sorry, super dramatic, but yeah, like it's like that was my understanding, was that like essentially they're trying to do this like weird thing where it's like, oh, like they're trying to farm out like just
Gotcha.
like creme of the crop, but
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
just I will say from like a society standpoint, like dude, you can't just like massacre a big bunch of your citizens. Like
Yeah,
it's like
I
okay, like
that's a low point of this
yeah.
show. The antagonists aren't compelling at all. Like I don't
No, it's
believe
okay.
them. I don't care for
Like
them.
okay, like I this sounds very shitty. But this is a concept that has admittedly been enforced by 4X type of games. But it's like humans and populations are resources that help build up your economy. Even if you don't
Yeah.
give shit about them as humanity, it's like still useful to have populations, right? And so to just like go out and like deck out a big bunch of your population, like seemingly it's like, dude, like you need these people so that they can generate need for goods so that you can, as a country get richer, blah blah. Like it's like as weird as it
I
sounds,
think
it's like it like kind of doesn't make sense. Like it's like seems almost like way too crazy that these guys are actually just going through and deciding to like call a big bunch of their population. It's like I get that like you want to find elite vampires, but it's like just
see,
from like
see
yeah.
I don't understand that because like I would understand. So I understand the
Yeah.
search
Okay.
for elite if
Yeah.
the reason is to ultimately protect your nation, right?
Yeah.
That's why you're looking for
Yeah.
it. But if you're destroying your nation to do that, then I just don't understand the logic
Yeah,
behind
right.
it
It's just
anymore,
like
right?
yeah, like I said, like it's just like it feels like it's one of the things where like yeah, I get the idea. They're trying to paint this idea that these guys are like sons of bitches that don't give a shit about human life, but it's like even if you aren't like a compassionate person, like just from like a government standpoint, like having bodies is like a useful thing, right? It's
Yeah.
just like yeah, it's just like like kind of like I'm not sure I'm like in 100% sold. That being said, this show lands very squarely into, shall I say, like East Asian drama. Like it's like the dramatic level of this show is like borderline creeping into like K-drama levels, like just like like that's kind of what it is. And so I think like like I'm not obviously I'm not pleased seeing that type of stuff, but it also like kind of falls in line with just, shall I say, like the overly flary dramatic shit. Like it's just yeah, like it's like I kind of get it. But yeah,
Yeah. And
this
so
is
this is actually the last show
okay.
of the contenders, which means it's
Okay,
actually on the
yeah.
chopping block next week.
Okay,
So
yeah.
next week be interesting. So now we should be in the drop list.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And
Alrighty.
so these are the bottom 5 shows, and we can choose the 2 episodes, 2 shows that we're dropping. And at number 11, for the first time, it is Don't
Yes.
Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro. I gave it my lowest score of this week at 4.4. You gave it a score of 5 for a rolling average of 5.28.
What was the reason for your score right here?
Um, it's just lot. Okay, so for this episode specifically, I mean, I was already getting tired of like the
Okay. Yeah.
jokes and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, but Lots of scenes this week were more theoretical situations, right?
Okay.
Like
Yes.
there's like, oh, what happens if this happened?
Yeah.
This. And when you look at the actual things that happened, there wasn't
Yeah.
much that happened.
Okay.
Like they went to
Yeah.
the festival and stuff.
Hmm.
But I just don't think there is much progress that's going on.
Yeah, there's
Um,
not too much juice left. I will say that like
yeah,
one of my hopes for this show was that they actually end up together and you explore the dynamic essentially of, shall I say like a very headstrong woman versus,
yeah,
like a very, shall I say, like quiet but loving guy. Like that was where I was kind of hoping it, and the fact that now we're already in episode 8 and they're still on this, shall I
yeah,
say, this very prototypical East Asian show of like this is just a pursuit, like it's still very squarely in the middle. It's like
yeah.
it's kind of like I at this point it's like like I don't have a ton of
The
hope. Yeah,
ending
yeah.
is most likely when they get together,
Yes, when
right?
they get together, right? And I think that like like I said, like at this point, like it is getting pretty tropey. Like there's parts of me that like for example, like that bathtub scene. It's like, dude, like just like she okay,
Yeah.
okay. It's not like that tsundere because she's like legitimately showing off her body, but like okay, like it's like it would have been so much cooler if she's like, you know what, like I want to take like a risk. And like for the first time, okay, maybe like okay, in the past she could have thought of it tactically as like, oh, let's like get him to squeal extra lots by showing
Yeah.
like some skin. But like there was a tiny part of me that was like, ooh, it would be kind of cool if she like decides that like she actually wants him to like
Hmm.
get a desire, like a burning desire for it, like
Yeah.
get his like sexual drive going, right? It's like the possessiveness, right? Like I wanted to see the possessiveness kind of like kick her into the next step of like action, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, man, it's just like kind of like once again like yeah, it's like
Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
all right, like,
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I felt like there was like a potential moment for like some extra that like just like didn't quite get there. So
I agree.
yeah, alrighty. At number 12, Hero. You gave a score of 5.5. I gave a score of 6. Rolling average is now 5.26, raised up by 0.07.
Yeah. So this was the other show that I was
Okay.
mentioning in terms of upward
Yeah.
trend.
Yeah.
To Your Eternity, he could have been going up ever
Yeah.
since like the first 2 weeks.
Yeah. This one saw an upward trend, I think, after like episode 3 or something. I think the one
Yeah.
episode where
Yeah.
they had the uncomfortable but very tactical, like, physical.
Let me see. It was episode
Yeah.
3.
Yeah. And so after that, it's kind of has an upward trajectory. This episode, I will admit, like, it's just like, I think like it's almost like I have to give it credit for doing its job well, but like, dude, do I hate his like coworker? Like, I just like it's just
Yep.
like just like pisses me off like so much. It's like, dude, like holy shit, like I just like genuinely dislike her a lot. It's just like this character is okay, like, and to be fair, I have to give the show credit that like I'm feeling this much about a character, right? It's like
Sure.
you painted her almost as like, oh, like she's like supposed to be the one, right? Like you almost like, okay, like if you had the interests of the main character in heart, okay, or second main character,
If
okay,
I,
yeah, okay,
yeah,
like
I
you would
wouldn't-
have
I would not.
no, it's like initial. Okay, the first like 2 episodes, you were maybe like, oh yeah,
Oh,
like it's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's like, oh, like this
I
would be
agree.
nice, and then like the show essentially 180s it, and now you're just like, geez,
Yeah.
like holy shit, like I just like this is like unbearably like yikes, like just like, and so I have to give the show credit for that. I will say that I've realized now that since we are already in episode 8, once again, kind of like just a common theme of like this is week 9 of the show, episode like like week 8 of the episodes. I now begin to kind of see some of these lenses as like, okay, we're past the 2/3 checkpoint. What's left or what's gonna happen? And
What's your prediction? Because I haven't watched. I've read the
okay,
manga anymore after this point. So
okay, so it seems like okay, so if this is a show that's gonna go on like longer and longer and longer, I think what's gonna happen is like she's gonna like just go back with her brother as like like as he like wants to, and then there's kind of this reconnection moment, and this time it's like, oh my gosh, like there's like like the extra dimension now. She's no longer like exactly codependent. There's this romance that blooms, blah blah. By the way, still very
interesting.
very creeped up by the situation, but I'm like, okay, that's like what I would think would happen if that's what I would think would happen if the show like is like a multi-season type of thing, like, and like just the
Oh,
story
okay,
kind
cool.
of drags out. Okay, that's my
I
prediction
I
there.
I think
Okay.
and I guess I'm not sure helps our or informs us, but I'm pretty sure the manga is ending soon or it already
Okay.
has ended.
Okay.
And so I think this season is just a single season. but I could be wrong.
Ooh. Okay. So if this is just one story, okay, this is the really bad part where I feel like, okay, unfortunately, like a lot of the
Yeah, so the
goodwill.
so the light novel ended yesterday.
Okay, but that's still maybe like a couple seasons worth of material at this point, maybe.
Well, no, because the original run was 2018 to 2021, and then the manga started in 2018. I stopped reading it a year ago, I think
Okay.
maybe. So I think it might just be a single season show.
Oh, and just like it's just done. Even though there's like
Yeah.
theoretically more story, like it'll probably just be
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Or
Yeah,
so because we know that, or I know that,
yeah.
I think it's like she's gonna go back to her parents. She will realize she'll overcome by herself like the situation that's going on. I don't think they're gonna get together, but it's more like, wow, I'm glad that this has happened to me. I've grown from it. That we can be
Okay.
friends. Well, that's the
Yeah.
hope, right? We can be
Okay, that's okay.
friends.
I'll be super honest. That's the hope. I'm
Yeah,
predicting if this is just actually gonna end like as is, dog. Like this gonna be like too
gonna
afraid of
tank.
the possibility. No, no, like they're gonna end up together. There's like too many episodes where like there's too many moments where like they're trying to set this like thing up and like
Especially this
yes,
episode.
yeah, like I said, like it could be a psych out and like I would kind of give it some respect, but like dude, I just
Yes.
okay, like just like the way the title is phrased and stuff like that, like it's just like I'm so afraid that like the goodwill, like some of the nuanced goodwill that the show has earned in my book is actually just gonna like fucking like just go down the fucking drain. They're gonna end up with each other for some like fucking nonsense.
Who do you want
reason.
him
Like,
to be with?
I mean, at this point, right? It's okay. I truly think the best answer is that the dude takes some time to figure out some shit for himself because he only very recently got into
Yep.
like shall I say the
Yeah,
proper
yeah.
zone. Okay, this is like if it were a real life person, right? Okay. That being said, like if you were to like have to ship it, like oh, hopefully just with with Goto, with his
Gojo.
manager, right? Yeah, Gojo. Yeah,
Yep.
it's like that's how like that's how it should be at this point, and like that's like like that's what I think like would be like the preferred outcome.
I think the
for
soul
me.
searching is you're right, the best choice.
Yes, yeah, I think that's like okay, like if I had a real life friend that like was in this situation like this, I think the soul searching is like the most appropriate one. That being said,
Yeah.
once again, like I am still so very hesitant to give this show like enough like props of being like incredibly, shall I say, like incredibly well adjusted and like just like real life stuff like because once again like I'll just be honest, right, like the type of people who usually write shows, right, they're mangakas, like they've dedicated their whole life to this craft. They're not the type of people that are going out there and like like living like an incredible life. It's like I would be very surprised if his take ends up being nuanced enough to the point, like I said, where like some of these things like actually happen the way that we would want them to happen. And I'm not saying that like
Yeah.
we're some like social like Casanovas. I just think we're like decently adjusted people, and so it's like
I don't know if it's fair to assume
Yeah.
that. It's more so that it's just a trope, right? It's a trend that a lot of mangas
Yeah.
have, and so
I
why
mean,
not
yeah,
just
yeah, it is like
copy
it
it?
is kind of a thing too, where it's like you have to sell volumes, right? And so it's like like why buck off the trend like so incredibly when you could just have a formula that clearly Japan just loves to lap up anyways, right? It's like why change something? Why fix it if it ain't broke? And so yeah, I think that that's also like an aspect too, where it's just like I don't expect this to actually go like that, like shall I say, like satisfactorily wrapped up. But yeah, like I said, I'm unfortunately am kind of predicting a lot of the goodwill gets erased. We'll see. I'm really hoping, just like you, that the ending essentially ends up being here's like a nice slice of moments, but she finally finds her independence. I would like a lot of the moments in this episode to actually just be a psych out, but I'm not so sure of that. So yeah, we'll see. Well, yeah, upward trend nonetheless.
Number 13 is Super Cub. I went down by one spot. I gave it a score of 5.6. You gave it a score of 5 for rolling average of 5.23. So it has only gone up by 0.01.
Yeah.
What your thoughts of this show?
It's I think just at this point, like I will give it the credit where it's due and say like if we're just trying to watch something very comfy, this is like something to watch. That being said, like I think it's just like we've gotten introduced to so much more plot progression / character progression, and it still seemed very vapid. Was kind of like the best way of like me to describe it. It's almost like okay, like in the past, like you could say like oh, like you were just focusing on one character, you were just focusing on another one. Now we have like a full cast of like oh, like here's like The girl with the bike. Here's her. Here's her dad. Like, here's like
Yeah.
this cafe. Here's like, them like getting ready for winter and all that. And like, still, despite all of that, like, it still just like doesn't seem like there's like too much substance. Like, and obviously, yes, like this is a show where in my mind, like it's trying to capture the Miyazaki thing of like the silence between the claps is what makes the claps happen, and like that's kind of what this show's trying to do. But yeah, I don't know. I just like I at this point, it's just kind of like I'm not sure like if there's like too much positive, I guess, like upward trend that I can see at this point. It's kind of like yeah.
So I put over here that for the most part it's just her living her life
Yeah.
now.
Mm-hmm.
So last week I brought the point of the color contrast and the
Yeah.
colors being more vibrant
Yeah.
towards the end. So this episode has the same thing, but it happens
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah.
Uh, the end's a little bit more apparent when she
Yeah.
sips the
Yes.
coffee.
Yeah. And
The
then
color
like.
brightens,
Mm-hmm.
and then the second thing that happens is when she puts her hands in her hand gloves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking into it a little bit too much because I
Mm-hmm.
think that because that choice was intentional, right, for
Yeah.
the show to be colorful during those moments. Because
Yeah.
it's one thing to go from like dull colors to high contrast over the
Yeah.
course of one episode, but for the contrast
Go
to
up and then
be
back
more
down.
apparent
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then go back down, I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
is there
Maybe
meaning
this is
behind it?
actually, yeah, there maybe it's like some intentional, yeah, and I do
And
think that.
so,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, so I was just gonna say the
Yeah.
if you're making that intentional, I
Yes.
had two forms of thought. The first form is they just want to make it brighter during the moments where it's very comfy,
Yeah.
right? My second thought is a bit more darker, is that she's actually very depressed as a. Uh, yeah, this is a bit
Okay.
darker. She's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
depressed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Before
And then
any
these
of
are
this
like yeah.
happens, she just lives by
Yeah.
herself. We
Yeah.
have no context as to why she
Yeah.
lives alone,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't inform us, right,
Yeah.
why she lives alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day she finally gets this cup, and during the moments when it becomes colorful, she
Yeah.
realizes, oh, there's actually a reason to live. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
feel
Mm-hmm.
great living in this world.
Yeah.
Now, that's a lot of assumptions made by
Yeah.
me. We'll see how it pans out because I believe, oh, this is a novel series that's still going on. So maybe that's not the case,
Okay.
but
Yeah. But yeah.
well, I enjoyed artwork, so
Yeah. Exactly. Like. Yeah. That's it's there. Number 14. Joanne, the Prince of Blood and Snow. Remained at number 14. You gave it a score of 4.5. I gave it a score of 5. The rolling average has now rolled down by 0.05 to sit at 5.11. This is one of those. I was almost like frustrated that like I ended up my gut reaction was to give it a 5 because I like
yeah.
didn't want to give it a 5. Like I think because last week we called out that like I was like I actually earned like pretty much a 5 across the board just because like it like
Yeah.
always has like something good but then like almost like not quite enough. This was once again like almost like the same thing where it's just like most of the episodes just like dude so much like just like it's okay. Like let me put it like this like. When you have like a story like Mars Red, where like it's like so dramatic, but there's kind of like almost like an extra oomph to the dramaticism. Like at least like you watch it, and you're kind of like, ooh, like like man, this like feels like dramatic and like this is enjoyable. Like this shows like dramaticism, like it like doesn't feel like it's just kind of like ugh, like all right, let's just get this over with. Like she's like so like fucking angsty with like like that fight and just like it's like it feels like very feels like a lot and it doesn't like manage to pack an edge of like at least like it's kind of like oh there's like beauty in the drama which I think like Mars Red has executed in some of his episodes, right? Like there's kind of like there's like a beauty in it. I like just felt like it just wasn't here. The only reason I still gave it like a 5 was because I appreciate it at the very end where you finally get to see like the boss guy's story and like that like that whole aspect. Like this is once again just like such a Joran thing where it's just like there's like garbage and then like gets elevated by one thing and like that one thing is like it's pretty decent but it's like it's yeah like
I agree. I actually like the ending because she faked her own death,
yeah
which is funny because that would make sense because
Yeah.
right the reason why Joran we call her
Yeah.
Joran, but what's her
Yeah.
real name?
Yeah.
Yuki
yeah
Mura.
yeah
The reason why she's living in this village in the first was because she faked her own death. So it
Yes,
made
yeah.
sense that the I forgot her name, the blonde.
yeah
She also faked her own death.
yeah mm-hmm.
I don't know if you realize, but in the OP, it actually tells you that we're in book 2. It actually, I think arc 2.
Okay. I see.
That was just a small thing, but I agree that a lot of the show is very tropey and cliche. Like
Yeah.
the fight with Tsuki it ends with the two like going through each other like that. It's like, okay, that's super cliche. I still don't understand why the guy or
Yeah,
girl
yeah,
was
yeah,
obsessed with
yeah. What's the
Yukimura.
beauty
Like,
of? It's like,
yeah, I
oh,
don't know about it.
like for example, okay,
I
like
don't believe that.
yeah, okay, like for example, okay, I will say that I can see the show's attempt at kind of like making like the beauty out of the dramatic flair, where she goes, "I
Yeah,
want to be the center of your attention. I want to be the person that you think about,"
yeah, yeah,
but it
yeah.
just falls so flat, like executionally wise, and that's like saying something considering that, like, for example, like I think like this is a very appropriate to consider, like to compare to Mars Red, like where it's like even if it's like crazy dramatic, let's talk about like oh the comfort woman that the masked boy visits, right, and like how
Yeah.
that ends. Like I still felt a lot more off of that than like this stuff because it's like at least like that one it's like oh it's like there's like it's like a commentary on like the fragility and shit like that. It's like okay, like I feel that one, like I kind of like I get it. Like this one, like I can see the like the attempt where she like espouses that line of like oh I want to be the one you think about, but it just feels like so like fucking like just like it just like didn't execute well and it just like falls flat. You just kind of like
I think there's just it's less even of a drama. It's more it just doesn't make sense. Like the
yeah
way it ended. So
yeah
Tsuki died by this random black crow that came,
yeah.
and we
You're
have
just
no
like what
explanation to
yeah
what caused it. Right?
yeah
I also thought that when she got rescued by the I don't know what the guy's name
yeah
is,
yeah the boss guy yeah
long-haired guy. Yeah,
yeah
yeah. And he left her
hmm
there. I was like, she's probably just gonna walk into the ocean to commit
yeah
suicide, and that's what she does. I was
yeah
like, okay, everything just makes when she didn't kill Tsuki. I was like,
yeah
I wonder if Asahi's gonna do something here. And then she
yeah I was gonna
flashes
say
back,
that
married to Asahi.
yeah
I'm like, it just feels so predictable. Except the
yeah
ending, I didn't predict that, but it's
yeah
like very cliche and tropey.
yeah like I said like and I feel like it's like I kind of get like what they're trying to aim for but this show just most consistent like very consistently is just like there's a lot of meh and then like some goodness that kind of like props it up a little
Yeah.
bit but that's just continually that pattern.
All right. At the bottom of the barrel is Godzilla, singular point at number 15. Went up by 2 spots, which is funny because really it's just always the bottom spot, and because the show's
Okay.
eliminated, it keeps going up. I give it a score of 5. You give it a score of 4, which is your lowest score of this week.
Yeah.
For a rolling average of 4.85, total decrease of 0.05. Why did you give it the lowest score?
It's just like I feel like okay, like this is okay. This is the only episode where after I watched it and I was about to punch in the rating, I go, "Wait a second, what the fuck?" And then like I had to like go back and like rewatch some of it because it's just like so like I actually no kidding. Like this is the first time this has happened in this show where like I finished an episode, I like had some thoughts, and then I was about to put a rating in, and I was like, "Wait a second, I like don't actually like hold a sec, I need a refresh." Like just like, and I think that like speaks to the testament. It's just like it's so drony. Like holy crap! Like it's like we get that like oh Godzilla's supposed to show up at some point, but like all the events just seem like so like fucking like inconsequential. Like the okay for example like for me like the biggest interesting part is that we see that the fucking Defendo bot thingamajig was like
Yeah.
playing rock paper scissors with the kids and like there's this almost
Yeah.
like this element of like oh like and I know I will bet you money that that does not get explored like ever again in the rest of the show just like based on how it is and like I said like the fact that like that tiny moment was like the only moment that I really remember like the rest of it is just like it just feels like it's like you're trying to move the 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 story, the plot needle forward, and it just still feels like it's like, dude, like holy crap, like it just feels like nothing of like that much significance like ended up showing up. Like he had this like almost like this little moment where like I think you're supposed to think it's so cool as a viewer, where he like has the example of like the shadow being cast by the object, and it's like
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
like it's like the perception thing. It's just like dude, like man, like nobody gives a shit. It's like I said, like it's kind of like goes back to the original point of like either a you are somebody that like gets really like just really buys into the pseudoscience, either because you understand physics a lot better than me, and for some reason the show's physics is actually like kind of like somehow like more 5D than I thought it was, or B like you just don't understand physics and you just like are fascinated by like listening to stuff you don't understand. If you're that type of a person, you've already been like kind of wowed by that, and you don't need to continue to like make this like the focus of the show, just being like oh yo like check out this new like crazy like like theoretical physics thing. Or B you just don't give a shit like me and it's just continuously over and over keeps on trying to slap you in the faces and stuff like dude like I don't care, just show me more like show me more instance like oh like when I see the big sea serpent thingamajig get attacked and they're like oh it could have been Godzilla biting it, it's like yes there you go, show me more of this stuff, like give me more like plot advancement stuff, right? It's like build up the mystery of the kaiju of like the of the fucking thing. It's just like I don't know. Like it just like felt so frustrating. Like I said, the first time in this gauntlet where I actually went like shit. I have to go rewatch some of it because I just genuinely did not remember what the fuck happened like in its entirety. Like if you were to quiz me like what happened, like yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, this show really just is really just a story about pseudoscience,
Yeah.
right? Because I still don't feel for the characters at all. I
Yeah.
just don't think they do much really. Honestly, the most intriguing character or the character that I hope will survive is the bot, the AI bot that's
Yeah.
inside the big robot.
Exactly.
That's actually the
Yeah.
character that I care about the most, which
Hmm.
is not a good
Yeah. Yeah.
thing to happen.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like we see like this calamity happening, right? And for whatever reason, like the focus is on these characters trying to figure out their origin.
Yeah.
But I think it would make more sense if like these monsters like killed people and then we see the
Yeah.
terror, right? And so we
Yeah.
kind of feel for humanity, but we kind of don't. It's just,
Yeah, it's just like a big
oh,
bunch of inconsequential shit. Like they didn't okay,
yeah,
like it's
yeah.
like okay,
There's no
dude,
depth.
like for example, okay, like let me tell you, this would have been so easy. Just kill the guy that went missing or whatever, right? Remember how they go, oh,
Yeah.
one of our coworkers went missing. I was like, dude, you're just like, well, like it's like it's almost you're trying so hard to make sure that like there's like nothing of significance happening. Like don't cop
Yeah.
out and go, oh, maybe he fell off the thing or whatever, or we just
The
lost him.
water.
Like
Yeah.
it's like show me the body, like just show me like some loss of human life, like show me like the stakes, and it's just like it's just like none of it. Like it's just like okay,
Yeah, my prediction, if for whatever reason the show
Mhm.
continues to exist for next week,
Yeah.
is that the guy fell in the water and he is like transported to the future or something. That's my guess to what happens to him. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's still more of the same with this show, right?
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's been at the bottom for I think every single week, if I'm not mistaken. I
Yeah.
could be wrong, but I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Alrighty.
so we are at the end of the recaps. We're here at the drop list. We have 5 shows. Don't Toy with Me, Nagatoro? No, yeah, Nagatoro, Higahiro, Super Cub, Joran, and Godzilla Singular Point. And because we are at a uneven numbered week, I get to drop the first show. Here's my thought process. I'm gonna keep Higahiro because I
Yeah.
think at this point, if we just knocked off the bottom 2 scores, for the first 2 week scores, it will be one of the top shows.
Yeah.
So keeping it there. Of the remaining 4, I have more interest in Super Cub because I want to see if they do explore the whole depression
Yeah.
arc.
Theme.
So that leaves me with 3. Don't Toy with Me, Nagatoro, Joran, and Godzilla Single Point. And this one's tough because I think my thought process has to be which show do I want to see more of?
Okay.
And I'm willing to watch more.
Okay.
And funny enough, I'm actually okay with seeing more Joran.
Okay.
At least until this arc is over.
Okay.
And so, with the bottom 2, I actually have No More Hope. And I will be dropping Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro.
Okay. Yeah, that was your lowest score of the week. It makes sense.
Yeah, I just don't see any hope. And I've read the manga for this show.
Oh.
And so I can tell you now, they're still not together. And so I'm assuming so it's one of those shows where like it's the chase really that the entire series is about. So I'm okay with at this point dropping it. So that's my drop of the week. It is now your turn. Which show are you dropping?
I will say Higahiro, it's morbid curiosity, but also I do respect that, like you called out, outside of the first 2 episodes, this has been a pretty decently performing show. So we should keep that in mind. Like I said, there's a kind of a morbid curiosity. I'm predicting, unfortunately, all the goodwill gets erased by like this shitty ass ending, but we'll see if it actually ends up being that way. I do kind of have a fascination to want to continue to watch that one. And unlike which show is it? There was one show that I said I almost wanted to keep just because of like the curiosity of how dumpster fire. Oh, Yasuke. So like this is a tiny bit of that theme, but I will say that like this isn't actually guaranteed dumpster fire. So I think the integrity is there for me to keep it on the list, so that will not be dropped. I think when it comes to Joran, Super Cub, and Godzilla Singular Points, these are all actually shows I would be totally okay with not watching another episode of. I think I think there may be moods that strike me where I'll go like, oh yeah, sure, I want to watch some Super Cub. I want to listen to some nice classical music and kind of like I said, like just to kind of like slow the whole world down. Like yeah, maybe like occasionally there'll be the mood. In general though, doesn't feel like there's I don't really see there being like too much more special from like what we've already seen. When it comes to Joron, like it's just so frustrating how I think like like it's there's just so much crap that is gonna have to wade through. I think I'm slightly tempted to keep that one on only solely because I kind of want to see what this quote unquote final mission is.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
kind of want to see like a little bit of that. So I'm tempted to keep that one on. So it leaves me with Super Cub and Godzilla. At least I do have an artistic appreciation for Super Cub, whereas for Godzilla, it's just like some fucking nonsense. Like I said, like just like the pseudoscience, like it's not like impressive to me. Yeah, Godzilla just by process of pointing out qualities is the one that I cannot point a good quality out of, and as such, it will be the one that I drop.
All right, so we have two shows dropped. Now we each have a save still available. I will elect not to use my save.
I will not be using my save either.
All right, so
Yeah,
we have dropped two more shows, and so our gauntlet now is down to 13 shows. So if you go ahead and refresh the
yeah,
slideshow, you will see our current list. And it's so fascinating to me because when I look at these shows, I'm like, oh my goodness, there are shows that we have not watched since week one. Like
yeah.
we haven't seen Eden Zero. I forgot about Battle Athletes Restart
Oh yeah,
as well. I forgot these shows existed, but these are now the remaining 13 shows plus Way of the House Husband, since that has has
yeah.
survived the gauntlet. So yeah, we're down to 13 shows. What do you think about these shows so far?
Yeah, I will say, I think, okay, so this is kind of like an interesting thing where you, as a viewer, if you wanted to contribute towards this discussion, you are more than welcome to, make sure you kind of voice your opinions, whether it's on Discord or leaving comments on our YouTube channel or whatever. But, there is kind of an interesting dynamic now where, especially like I said, like at the beginning of the episode I called out, we are in episode 8 and we are past the 2/3 check mark for a lot of the shows. And when I think about kind of like what's left, there is an extra dimension of like for the shows that are probably going to last longer. So just right off the bat, I'm gonna guess Burning Kabaddi being a shonen is not gonna nicely wrap up in one season and just call it a go. Like they're gonna milk the show that like so
Yeah,
there's one.
so like Burning Kabaddi's
Yeah,
one, Shadow's House is actually
Shadow
one as
House is gonna
well.
be Shadow House is gonna be another one. Let's see. Are those
To
actually
Your Eternity is
okay? To Your
one.
Eternity is also gonna have that. Yeah.
Because really, I think the only shows that actually wrap like the story
Yeah.
wraps up. I think 86. I know I
Does
said
it?
earlier that
Okay.
it might have multiple seasons, but it actually might be
Yeah.
one season. But I could be wrong.
Okay. I would be
Um,
surprised if it just had one season, but yeah.
100%
Okay.
Odd Taxi because it's anime
Yeah.
only.
Yes.
Vivi for sure as well.
Yes.
So I think those two. I know for sure To Your Eternity,
Yeah.
Shadow's House, Burning Kabaddi, Tokyo Revengers all will exist
Ah.
for
Okay.
multiple
Okay.
seasons
Yeah.
because their source material is still going on.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that there is that to consider. I will say overall, I think that this week was kind of lackluster compared to the previous weeks, which is a little bit concerning considering that we should have theoretically been hitting the strides of like arcs kind of that. But there are a couple of shows. I think that even though the 86 the way it's executed is kind of clunky, it is like essentially setting up for like the final like another arc. The same thing happened with the Snow White notes. So there is kind of like still within expectations. Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see where some of these go. I think once again like the format of how will we treat these shows that have multiple seasons. Definitely would like to hear thoughts from you all about that. But yeah, that's definitely something we'll also have to consider. Otherwise, it was decent. It's yeah.
yeah. And so if you go on to the next slide, as just a recap for our gauntlet, we dropped two shows. Next week we'll have 13 shows, and then 11, 9, and then finally 7, where we select the gauntlet champions. We kind of at this point have decided what the format would look like, but we'll
Yeah.
talk more about that as we approach.
Yes.
And perks remaining, we both have our saves. If you want to support us financially, or want to join the community more intimate level, we are on Patreon at patreon.com/the anime podcast. We're trying to figure out a way to make it so that we're not the only ones actually voting for shows.
Yeah.
We could implement maybe like a community save for the future.
Yeah.
If you just want to join the community, we are on Discord. We have a server running. So the link will be down below on Twitch. Also be included in our YouTube channel as well. But
Alrighty.
that's about it for week 8.
Alrighty. Thanks for watching, and we will watching / listening, and hope to see you next week.
Yeah. Peace,
Alright.
peace.
Peace.